of their two daughters. And I was, of course, raised in Florence. I went to elementary school in Florence, South Carolina, kindergarten through 12th grade. And when I was in school at the time, schools were segregated. And you know what I mean by that. All of the students of color, African American students, attended one school system. White students attended another school system within the same town. And that, to me, I think when you're a child, if you feel happy as a child, as a little kid in kindergarten, you don't pay too much attention to that unless someone brings it to your attention. As you get a little older, you're certainly observant of the fact that life is a little bit different. And so, as a result of being from kindergarten through 8th grade, I liked my teachers. My parents knew some of them. Some of them went to our church. Some of them lived near us. And so that we were not friendly with them, but my parents knew them. When I was in 6th grade, the one thing I do remember that still sticks with me, I think about it not all the time, but sometimes. As you know, if you've been in the Southland, the weather is it's pretty gentle most of the time. Summers are hot, high humidity. Fall is cool. Winter is usually tolerable. However, I remember a very, very cold day. And my mother said, well, why don't you wear these jeans, pants? We called them jeans when I was a kid. And of course, they still call them jeans. To school under your dress so your legs will be warm. It was a very cold day. And I remember arriving in school. We walked to school about 4 blocks, one each way, to my elementary school from K through 8. And when I arrived into my 6th grade classroom, my teacher, Mrs. Perkins, once I put my books away in my desk, she told me because I wore the jeans to school that I needed to stand in the corner. I didn't understand that because I was doing what my mother told me to do. And actually, I was happy that it did because it was a cold, cold day, unusually cold. Well, standing in the corner is humiliating if anyone has ever had to do that for all morning. I remember that clearly, and I couldn't wait to get home to share with my mother what my 6th grade teacher did. And my mother really didn't hesitate to contact Mrs. Perkins. As I recall, I think she reached her the very next day. And she told her she didn't want me punished for something that she asked me to do. Now, that was a very different kind of experience that a person would have. But when it's on your mind, I think children learn what they live. Oh, I moved on. I didn't suffer any major problems as a result of that. But I say that because it is a situation that happened, though it happened to me, other situations that happen to children, it doesn't have to be about genes, but it can be about something else that will still remain with you. All right, now, after 8th grade, oh, by the way, when I was a kid, we did not own a car at all. We didn't get a car until we moved from an apartment to a house that we were fortunate. My grandfather, he had never been to an architecture school, but he built our first home. We were very proud of that home. So we moved there after I graduated from 8th grade, and then it was time for me to go into 9th grade in high school. And without a car, we survived. When we didn't have a car, we walked. We walked everywhere. We walked to church. We walked to school. We walked to neighborhood grocery stores if we needed a lot of groceries. I remember my parents taking a taxi home. We survived. Um, in walking, sometimes you see a whole lot more than you do if you were in a car. We walked by swimming pools. I did not learn how to swim until I was an adult. We walked by swimming pools that were closed to people of color. We did not go to the library in Florence at all. The libraries that I went to were in my school. We went to libraries when we were visiting relatives. We had relatives in Pittsburgh. We went to libraries there. We went to Washington, D.C. just to visit the city because of the historic significance. We went to libraries there. I never went to a library in Florence, South Carolina. Now, in high school, I can recall very, very much, of course, the schools were still segregated. I can recall when in 1954, for those of you who can recall when Thurgood Marshall, who was the first appointed justice of the African-American justice of the Supreme Court, he won a case and the Supreme Court declared at that time that segregated schools were unequal, I can recall. I was leaving the library in my high school, going to a class, and I heard some of my friends cheering. Of course, they were listening to the radio. We didn't have televisions in the schools at that time. And they were cheering because of the huge, speaking of breaking news, they didn't call it breaking news at that time, but that was definitely breaking news, that the Supreme Court had declared that schools should be integrated. Well, that was 1954. I graduated from high school in 1955. The high schools, or the schools in general, upon talking to my cousin who is a retired teacher in Florence, South Carolina, the schools did not become totally integrated until early in the 70s. But Thurgood Marshall and others lawyers who worked with him got that rolling, which is a good thing. Now, to move forward to high school, when I was in high school, 9th through 12th grade, we walked to school 4 miles each way. And I think when you're walking with your friends, you don't pay too much attention to situations unless they affect you. And in walking home, particularly in the spring of the year, and as you got closer to May when the weather got warmer, from the history, most of you listening to me, the rules of the South. Everything was just segregated. Lunch counters, bathrooms, any public facilities were segregated. I learned to feel humiliated by that. If it's a hot day and you're walking home, you don't have a lot of money, but you certainly have enough to buy a cold drink. And I never purchased a drink from a segregated counter. I just didn't want to do it. However, as I moved forward in life and I look back on some of the other things that happened to me, I'm recalling the fact that before I graduated from high school, I wanted to have a job. I wanted to earn a little money because I thought, what you earn is yours. And I remember my mother and father very carefully and cleverly, because we were church-going people. As I said, we walked everywhere, even to church, to all kinds of Bible studies. We didn't go to church 2 and 3 times a day, but we went to church every Sunday, unless someone was sick in the house. But I do recall when we were going to church one Sunday, I recall seeing situations along the way that made me feel, why is it as it is? Why is it that we can't do some of the things that we see other people doing, people who are not the same color as we are? But back to my story about getting a job. My father particularly did not want me to have a job. He said, you can work here at home. I'll give you an allowance and that's enough. But when you have girlfriends who are working, you want to be like your girlfriends. So I just kept this little plea up about wanting a job. So they gave in. They said, all right, you can have this job. Well, my father worked from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until midnight. And to get this job, I had to take public transportation. Well, I did be- because I wasn't going to let myself down. Um, we learned early that whatever you start to do, finish it. And if you can't finish it, then talk with someone about it as to why you can't finish it. So my aunt was working for this family. It was a white family, and she wanted to give it up because she wanted to be home with her children. And she asked me if I wanted the job, and I thought, oh, a job, that would be great. And I can work like my other girlfriends. Well, it was a job cooking for a family. I mean, really, I was, oh, must be about 16. I had cooked at home. I knew how to cook. I used to always say to my children once I got married and had children, I said, if you can read, you can cook. That's not necessarily so, but I told them that. And so I think they got the message. So most of my children can cook. However, I was cooking lunch for this family of four, two children and husband and wife, cleaning the kitchen up, of course, afterwards. I was doing light cleaning, dusting, vacuuming. Then I prepared dinner. I left after preparing the dinner. And to get home, as I said, my father was at work and I had to take public transportation. So, of course, I said, all right, you're into it now. Get on the bus, Lillie. And got on the bus, I did. Of course, you put your money in the little slot and you walk onto the bus. And I can recall, even to this day, you walk and you see some empty seats, particularly near the front. And if you've been cooking two meals and you're tired, it's in the summertime and it's in Florence, South Carolina, and it is hot. You really want to sit in the first seat that you see, you know? But my parents taught me to be obedient. And I said, well, all right, Lillie. I would talk to myself. You know, you have to go to the back. I never felt good about it. Never, never felt good. And I can understand why Rosa Parks, a year later in I think it was December 1 of 1955, I'm not sure what she was doing during that day, but when she was told to get up and let a white man sit, I can understand why she chose not to do it. And I even mentioned that to my father afterwards, after that happened, and after the bus boycott. And my dad looked at me and he said, you know, that would have made me so nervous for you. And I think that's why I did not do it, but it never made me feel good. So when Rosa Parks did that, I thought, hooray for her. What she has done or what she did changed history. And just a little of that I would like to insert. I'm recalling, as I said, we walked most places. I can recall when I was a little girl, and today being Pearl Harbor Day, I can recall we walked to my grandmother's house, my mother's parents. You know, I told you about my grandfather who built the house for us. And every week during World War II, I can remember as a little kid, they told me, all right, come, they knelt down and they were saying prayers. My grandmother had three sons who were in World War II. So I learned the importance of praying. And I learned if you pray, you know, you believed. Fortunately, her sons both, they were able to get out of the army. Of course, they had other physical um, problems, but they were not killed, what I am really saying. But we prayed, and we did that every week. We walked to her house. And sometimes I remember my mother would have me by the hand, and my sister, who's 3 years older than I am, she would be on the other side holding the other hand, and my aunt would be on the other side, and my mother would be on the other side. And it was dark when we walked home, but we accomplished it. So I think all of these things, the reason I'm sharing is that I always say children learn what they live, and what I learned as a child, as a young girl, and even when I was applying for college to make this little money. I don't think I even told you how much I made with my cooking situation with this family that I insisted on work, $15 a week. Of course, that was back in the 50s. We could get a loaf of bread for 15 cents. But when I think about that, that's $3 a day. I didn't work Saturdays and Sundays, but I was not going to give up because we were taught you start a task, you finish it. And you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Uh, Many times my parents always reminded us, about the golden rule. So that stuck with me. Now to get to the closure, because I did apply for college, um, education was seen as the ticket. It was even those very words were said in conversations with my sister and with and with me and with other kids our age. If you don't like something, you get as much education as you can hold, get as much education as you want, because you can see that as a way. I've seen changes in the South. It certainly is totally different. The memories will never change. When I applied for college in 1954, um, I knew about a lot of colleges in the South because I was a reader. I knew where they were, but why apply to a college if you know you're not going to be accepted? So I applied to HBCU schools, historically Black college and university. That's what it means. And I applied and was accepted at Clark College. I always wanted to be a teacher. One of the things I used to do as a little kid, when you see little girls playing house or playing school, my hand always shot up in the air. I wanted to be the teacher. I don't know, my girlfriends let me be the teacher probably more times than I needed to be, but they let me be the teacher. And I did become a teacher. Um, I was accepted at Clark College in 1955. I didn't go to college to look for a husband, but I found one. And one of the other things, the 19th of December, we will have been married 61 years. So I guess I didn't make a mistake with that, but that was not my intention. My intention was to get as much education as you want, which I did. My husband was there on a basketball scholarship because he had the skills of playing basketball, and it gave him a ticket to get an education as well. And we've been fortunate. We have lived here for, let's see, 55 years. We were living in Syracuse. We were lucky when we got married because my father-in-law gave us our first home. And we stayed there until our oldest daughter, she won't like it if I tell her age, so I won't, until she started kindergarten. So we stayed in Syracuse until she was ready to go to kindergarten. We wanted to find a home where she could have a yard to play in. The house that my father-in-law gave us, the yard was very, very small. And so we moved to Liverpool. That was so long ago. It was when General Electric was really going out of business in Syracuse. So there were a number of homes on sale in Liverpool. So it was either Liverpool or West Jenny of the school districts that we were to move in. I've had great neighbors in Liverpool. I can't complain at all, except that there is one situation that I will close with. After we had been here for at least 20 years, I used to walk every morning very, very early before going to work. I thought it was really invigorating. And I was walking along Blackberry Lane. It was early in the morning because I had to be in school at least by 7:45. I was working in the city of Syracuse at Webster School. and I was the vice principal over there, so I had to be there early. Actually, at least I tried to get there around 7:30. So it was in the spring of the year, and I think it was probably um, around 7-ish, and just walking along, minding my business, feeling very good about walking before going back home to get ready for the day. And all of a sudden, I saw a sheriff car driving towards me, and as he approached me, he sped up, and I didn't know why. I thought he was going to speed up and then slow down and then stop and ask me a question. Well, he sped up and he turned his wheel onto the grass. I didn't think I could jump so high, but I jumped so quickly because I thought he was going to run over me. And I said to him, "Why are you doing it? What's going on? Why did you do that?" I was shaking. I was so nervous. He jumped out of his car, slammed the door. I was just petrified. And I said, "Why are you doing this? I am walking." And he said, "Someone robbed a store in Liverpool up on 57." And I said, "Do you think if I robbed a store, I would be walking?" Well, that was the situation even to this day, and that happened, I would say, as many as 30 years ago. Fortunately, it happened only once. Once he found out that I was working in the city of Syracuse and that I was a vice principal, he calmed down. It's a situation that I would not wish on anyone, to be walking along and all of a sudden a police car is going to turn as if it is going to hit you. An innocent person walking down the street stopped because of someone, he said, a person of color robbed a store, and he was going to intimidate me that way. I did report the situation, and I hope I that would never ever happen to anyone. I've talked for a long time. There's a lot that I could say, but I am going to stop. I feel that my life has been a good one. I've been fortunate to meet so many great people. I finished that job in 1989 at Webster School as elementary vice principal there. And I was told about a job in Liverpool and asked if I would apply for it. And I thought, "Oh, will I get it?" And then I thought about what my mother and father used to always tell me. You have to believe in yourself. And if you want something, you just have to try. You may not always get what you want, but at least try. So I gave it a try and applied for the job. And it was the best decision that I ever made because it allowed me to work
Miss
at Nate Perry School and
Miss
become
Lillie,
their
Miss
principal.
Miss Lillie.
Yes.
I want to. You said something earlier, and I want to get back to that. Let Miss can I we let Miss Sonya say what she need introduce herself because I need to pick something apart that you just said a few minutes ago.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Okay. Well, I just wanted to finish by saying I did get that job at Nate Perry, and it was one of the best decisions that I made. I could have said no and not applied for the job, but I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
I,
Miss
Thank
I,
you,
Sonya.
Mrs. Fields.
I was finishing up anyway.
Right.
Mhm.
S- Sonia, why don't you tell us a little
Yeah,
bit about your.
sure. So I'm originally from North Carolina and a little small coastal town in North Carolina, and it's called New Bern. I have parents. Well, my father's deceased now, but my parents both are were very, very much influential in my life in many ways. Um, One of the things that I can really remember my parents sharing with me was definitely about um, being a person of color in a world that didn't always accept that. So I'm just going to start there because that's something, you know, Miss Lillie talked about being your childhood having an effect on you. And so as a child, that was a conversation that we had at my table often, was just, this is a world that may or may not accept you in the skin you're in. And so be aware of that. And here are some things to carry with you. And then I have to share their history a little bit, because my parents are two from the South, my father from North Carolina, my mother from Georgia. And they too, like Miss Lillie, went to HBCU schools, historically Black colleges and universities. They went to St. Augustine College in Raleigh, North Carolina, in 58, 59. And they've shared with me some of their experiences. And one experience that's very vivid memory to me is my grandmother from Georgia asked my mother, who was dating my father at the time as two college students, she asked her, whatever you do, there's a lot going on in your area, because as you know, Greensboro was the site of a lot of the historical things that happened at the lunch counters and all of that in the Raleigh-Durham area. And so my parents were somewhat a part of that movement. And my grandmother begged my mother to never go to a lunch counter, don't be a part of that movement. I sent you to college to get your music education degree. And my father was there on a football scholarship, and he was going to be a health teacher. And so they were very focused on what they were supposed to do, because that's what their parents told them to do. And of course, my mother and father went to lunch counters, because that's what you did when you were a college student and you wanted to be very much involved. You wanted to have your part in the civil rights movement. So they went to this lunch counter situation, and I might have been a Woolworth, or I don't know the store. That's coming back to my mind. But whatever happened, my grandmother used to sew clothes for my mother. And this story is so real to me. My mother said, I was sitting at the counter where I knew I was not going to be served, but I sat there anyway. And your father was a couple of seats away, and my best friend Gigi was sitting next to me. And all of a sudden she said, Shirley, my mother's first name is Shirley, your coat, take off your coat. It's on fire. Because the gentleman next to her had a cigar, and he had placed the cigar in the side of her coat, and her coat was burning while she was in the coat. Well, needless to say, my mother got out of the coat very quickly, but my father could see the disturbance. There was a lot of altercation. There were people running out of the restaurant, screaming. There were fights and all kinds of things. My father was beating this man, this white man, and they were yelling, the cops are here, they're here. And so all, as my mother can say, we all scattered. We don't know what happened, but we scattered, and we left the counter and left that particular place, that establishment of eating. So that story has stayed with me, because I cannot imagine being in a situation like that. But those stories were very real to me, because they were my parents' stories. They were only a step away from who I am. Not realizing that I might have my own experiences. I sort of lived theirs while I was growing up, because in 1971, when schools were integrated in North Carolina, I never went to school in segregation. My brother did, who's 4 years older than I am, but I did not go to school that way. I always went to school with white children. So I was very much, that was a part of my acclimation to school, was I didn't have the separation of students who looked different than I did. But my brother did. He had some significant stories in his life growing up that way as well. Another one of the stories that has been very important to my life and helped shape me as well is my father used to always say, as we were traveling to Georgia, that we needed to leave really early, like wake up at 4 and get out just when the sun was just coming up. And we couldn't understand why we always had to leave so early. It was going to be about a 10 to 11 hour drive. And on the way there, my father would always say, we have to leave early so dark won't catch us at night, because we don't want to be out at night, especially driving down here in the South I'm not familiar as much as your mother is with this part of the Deep South, but I can tell you now, dark will not catch us. So we would wake up at 3 and we would get out of that house between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, just as the sun was peaking in the summer times. We would go visit my grandparents. And I remember when we would drive through the state of South Carolina, my father would always say, everybody pay attention, because in this state, they will stop you and you may have to pay your ticket to a cop right then and there. You may have to do that. So I want to watch my speed here, and I want to be mindful of my surroundings. So everybody, when we're going through the state of South Carolina, don't sleep. I want you to look around. I want you to be alert, because I don't want to be stopped and then have to deal with anybody. So we would always try to stay awake during the state of South, which was the longest part of the trip. So I don't know how we ever did it, but we learned to do that. These were just the things that we were taught, that when I speak with other people who didn't have the same, I would call it at that time, color experiences, or being a person of color, they when I share these stories, they're amazed, and not in a good way, that something like this existed in our lifetime. So we would arrive to South Carolina. We would get through South Carolina for the most part without any problems. But my father would always tell the story to keep us awake, I think, while we were traveling. And that was when he would travel south with my mother. One particular time, he stopped at a filling station, and which was really a service station. You know, he stopped there to get gas, and unfortunately, the proprietor saw that he was a Black man and would not serve him gas. And his needle was getting rather low, but my father always knew not to let it get too low, because you didn't want to run out of gas. You always wanted to have a full tank when you were traveling, or close enough to a full tank. And he happened to pull up at another service station, and the gentleman there met him to the car and said, listen, you will not be able to find gas the way you're going. I'm going to have to give you an alternate route that's going to take you about 30 to 45 minutes out of your way. But there will be Black service stations along this route, and you'll be able to get the gas you need. But if you continue the way you're going, you're going to run out of gas and you're going to have some problems. So those are some of the stories that I was told as a child that stay with me today, because they're a part of who I am. They've shaped who I am. They have also colored my world in regards to how I feel about things, not necessarily how I respond to them, but how I feel about them. I think, Miss Lillie, you talked about that. The feeling of that is not a good feeling. And so the feeling stays with you, but maybe the incident goes away. I'd like to just kind of wrap up my story, my end of it, by saying that little did I know I was going to have some of my own experiences. So I had a different opportunity than my parents, which is I could actually choose what school I wanted to go to. They could choose, but they were limited in their choices, whereas my plate was wide open. I could choose where I really wanted to go to school. I chose to go to a school that really had my degree, which was music therapy. It was in Charlotte, North Carolina. It is a predominantly white institution that is now called Queen's University. It was Queen's College back in that time, and it was all girls. So it made it very interesting, because it was not only a minority in that it was all women, they were all white women, and it was less than 1% minority in terms of race differences. But I chose this school because it had my degree. And I had a lot of feelings about going there. I was received by many of the students there. My experience overall was very good. I felt like while I was there, I had to do a lot of educating, which was okay with me, because I feel if you don't know something, and I do, I should share it with you. So when I say I had to do a lot of educating, I was around a lot of white students, white girls who had different experiences, as well as different thoughts about Black people. And so a lot of that was just having conversations, much like what we're doing tonight, having conversations. so that everyone could be enlightened and everyone could be in a place where there was the possibility for understanding. So I did some of that during my college career, even in the 80s, and that's when I went to school. So that was still happening then. But I had this opportunity and I went to Queens College. I did end up getting my degree in music therapy 4 years later. But I had an experience that has shaped me. Again, these experiences do shape you. And the experience was they had homecoming one year, or they had it every year, but this particular year, I happened to be there and hang out a little longer. And they had homecoming, and my friend and I, my girlfriend and I, were walking to the cafeteria together, and there were two white women who were behind us, and they were older white women. I would say not younger than 60. So they were older women, and I'm thinking much older than that. They might have been in their 70s or 80s, but I don't know their age because I didn't ask, but they were older women. And I just remember walking in front of them. And I'm going to say something that might not represent my character as well, but remember, I was a college student, but I'm going to be honest about it. And the one woman said to the other woman out loud that I really can't believe that Queens would allow this. So my girlfriend and I, we just kept walking. We were curious as to what Queens wouldn't allow. And so we slowed down our pace and we heard the other woman say, I know, it's very disturbing that Queens would allow this. I cannot believe the number of students that are here on this campus and how they would allow this. So we began to narrow this conversation a little bit and think, are they talking about women of color being on this campus? This is 1986, 84, 83. What are they talking about? And she basically said, yes, Queens has allowed all of these different students to come on campus, and I just cannot believe they would lower their standards. I was shocked. But I kept walking, and Lynn, my girlfriend, said, should it be you or should it be me? And I said, oh, please allow me. And I turned around and I said to this lady, I don't quite know what you mean, but I think what you mean, and I don't think I'm making an assumption, I think what you mean is that students of color are finally on this campus and that you believe Queens has lowered their standards because we're here. And I said, you are very ignorant for saying that. And I walked away from her and she said, I am speechless. I cannot believe that you would say that to me. I am appalled. And I just continued to walk away from her. I believe I said a few choice other words. I don't remember right now what I said, but we went into the cafeteria. We could barely eat because we knew that we felt uncomfortable. We shared this with our RA, who was very upset about it. And I don't know what happened to it after that, but I didn't think, of course I shared it with my parents later that evening, but I didn't think that their experiences back in the 50s and 60s would be my experiences. I thought time had passed, progress had happened, and that we were past some of those points. But what I've realized is that it takes time for change, and not everybody's going to change at the same rate. And I was taught that as a child that people arrive where they are because of their experiences, and it will take time. And so thank you for letting me share. There's so much more about my life that I could share because it goes full circle from there with different things in my life. But those have been the things that have been ingrained in me, and they're still with me today. And believe it or not, when you hear those kind of stories from your parents, you share them with your children because those are the stories of you. They're the stories of your family and your heritage. And they're very important stories to share because they belong to a real experience. So thank you for listening and letting me share.
Thanks, Sonya. Reverend Jackson.
I'm just going to be very brief, Garrett. Everybody, thank you for having me, inviting me, Pastor Anderson. My name is Marcus Jackson. I'm senior pastor of the Hope Memorial Community Church here in Syracuse. I am originally from Ocala, Florida. My dad's former chaplain of the Navy, as well as an elder in the AME Zion Church. I did elementary school in Massachusetts, college at Catholic University in DC, but I'm here in Syracuse and I love it. I like it. I like the snow. I like all of it. So thanks for having me. So yeah, that's me.
Is that you?
That's me. That's me.
You have a question for me?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So you were amazed. And of course, you know, this was 35 years ago, you said, and having come from the South, and you were amazed or surprised or shocked that the police officer had stopped you that day walking, even though you had worked so hard to assimilate. And you know, at the beginning of your story, you talked about wanting to, and you almost said wanting to get a better education for your kids, so you moved to Liverpool, and you know, you went in that vein, and you seem to have been surprised, genuinely surprised, that the police stopped you. And as I'm listening to you, I'm like, why were you surprised? This is our reality. This is our day-to-day reality. And see, we've gotten confused. We've gotten confused. I think we've gotten complacent, and some of us have actually gotten comfortable or been lulled into this sleep. And we've been told that if we went to the right schools, we learned to dress the right way, use English in its proper form, and get the right job and marry the right persons and live in the right neighborhoods, that we'll be accepted. And that's never been the case. And that will never, you know, and so this year, everybody wants to have these conversations and these dialogues about racism and prejudices and stuff like that. And I appreciate that. But 1 year of attention to a 400-year issue is not going to go away. So what Garrett and I have been talking about is, if we're going to get to the root cause of this, if we really want to see change, and not just have a couple little talks and have some coffee and check off that diet and put a Black Lives Matter flag out in our front yard so that we feel better about ourselves, we've got to get to the place that we are going to be honest and open in these conversations. The first part of it is, Black people cannot end prejudice, racism. We can't do it, because racism implies power, and Black folk as a whole don't have the power to end it.
Well, I'd like to respond. You know, I do feel, and I guess it certainly is, there's nothing wrong with feeling like we were born. Okay, when we were born, you're an innocent baby. You look around in the NICU and the baby units in the hospital, you see babies of all colors. Prejudice comes as a result of someone saying something, talking with them. Now, I cannot go back, and I have not seen that particular sheriff, but I would hope that once we talk with people, we're not going to change everyone. Absolutely, we're not. But just that we are talking tonight, I guess I have faith that if we have 10 people who are listening to us now, I think some people could change. Now, I could have chosen, I chose Liverpool for the schools for my children, mostly because I wanted a yard that I could find that I liked. And that's why I chose it, as well as I felt that I wanted them. I think they could have gotten a good education in Syracuse, but I wanted them to go to school in Liverpool, and I am not at all sorry, because they did get a good education. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that if you speak to a person, that particular sheriff who stopped me, if I could have tracked him, and I certainly wasn't interested in that. I'm hoping that just our discussion that day, I don't think you can make a person not be prejudiced. I don't think so. But I would like to think that sometimes just someone talking to people, it might soften them a little bit. I'm hoping that he would not have stopped another person, but chances are, in that matter, chances are he may have, because we're not going to change everyone. but I think you might, I'd
Because
like to
racism and
believe,
prejudice is rooted in fear.
I'd like to
It's rooted in
believe
fear.
that it makes, yes, right. He was afraid and he made me frightened. That was the first time that anything like that ever happened to me. But I'm saying that just tonight that we are talking, I think if you talk with people, people begin to think about what they heard. And I don't think you can force people to try to look at people differently.
No, no. But in the talking,
But every time you speak, pardon, I didn't
no,
hear what you.
no, ma'am. I was just gonna say, in the talking, we we have learned historically to be careful in what we say, because history has shown us that professionally and often physically, our survival depends on the level of uncomfortability we give to white folk. If
Well,
in the workplace, in most workplaces, I'm fortunate to work in a place where I don't have to worry about it. But in the workplace, most of us have gotten to the place that we know it's like an unwritten rule that if you want to move up in this company, you need to show up and be invisible. The because your career depends on it.
mhm.
I think some of what you're saying really, if I can just kind of reflect what you're saying, I think some of what you're saying is really has a lot of validity, that you do show up and you have this sense of, I have a place here, but I'm limited in who I can truly be and who I can truly become.
Exactly. Right.
And that has been an ingrained part of how we have been taught to live our lives as people as Black people, as people of color.
Mhm.
But I know also that through conversations that we feel at the right time we need to have, and
Mhm.
through our posture and position that we take with us every day. When we look back at some of the things that we've been told, I'm going to speak personally, some of the things that my parents have shared with me.
Mhm.
It's been the fact that they showed up every day.
Mhm.
It's been the fact that they have been
Yeah.
in the skin that they were in and unafraid and dealt with what was going on around them. It's been that persistence and that perseverance that has given us, I guess, a better place. Even though we weren't in that better place, it gave us a better place. It gave us a better sense of, we can get up in the morning and go to this job. We can get up in the morning and perform this task. So I see where these kinds of conversations are important to have, but at the same time, I believe that our voices do need to be more direct, stronger, in the sense that I think there was a point in our history where people weren't really listening. I mean, yes, there were protests and all of that, and that's happening today. But I think we're in a different place, though. I think we're in a place where
I do
white
too.
folks are saying, I want to listen. And listen,
agree. I agree.
I don't know that that's true, but I don't think that this would be happening if people didn't want to listen. And I think that's the difference. When Dr. King and others and whoever else, I'm always using him as an example, but when others were out there, people didn't want to listen. So they had to create laws and do all kinds of things just to get people to listen. I think today we've got a different audience. I think today we have people who are willing to listen to our voice. And I say, let's position it. Let's position it. Let's don't take away the fact that conversation is still good. We were created, I believe, by a Heavenly Father who thought that putting us all together was a good thing. Putting us all together was not a mistake. Having us come from all kinds of places and identities and cultures, culturally speaking, not identities, because for those of us who are in Christ, we are one. But I mean, I believe today that that was not a mistake, just as it wasn't when he created us. And so I believe that as we are gathering like this, it's important for us to remember we are being heard. And that's the difference, I think. I don't
agree.
know. I don't know if you think that, Marcus, or not, but I'm thinking that's where we are today. And so I think our voice needs to be very clear, but I think we need to use this platform. We have one. Let's use it and let our voices be heard. And I think we're going to see a difference than what we saw 50 years ago, because people want to listen.
Pastor Anderson, she sounds like a church lady.
I agree.
She sounds like a
Yes.
church lady, talking about all that faith and all that kinds of stuff. But you know, there's a difference between allies and accomplices. There's a difference between allies and accomplices.
Tease that out for us, please.
Yeah.
Yes, what do you mean?
I didn't invite you to preach, Marcus, but you can tease it out a little bit.
No. It's Monday night, my night off. You know, we have some folk. How long do we have on tonight, Garrett?
Oh, well, nobody's left, so let's keep going. I've got a couple questions I want to ask you from the viewers, though.
Right. So it's my belief that allies are folk who uninvited show up and get to work doing busy work, and they're doing it on your behalf, uninvited and unintentional, and just doing something to be doing it. Whereas an accomplices is that ride or die. We'll have your back. We'll get in the clay, the mud, the mire with you. And I think that's what we need. We need accomplices. We've had so many allies on the battlefield that got out there just to be seen, to say that they marched, to say that they have a Black Lives Matter sticker on the back of their car or poster in the yard. Whereas an accomplice is that person in the workplace that says, you know what, let's give Henry an opportunity to do this job, or let's create a place for Henry to have a job, or let's help Henry get his GED.
Well,
There's a difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am a believer
agree.
in,
I
I just believe I'd like to give people a chance. We are not going to change everyone. Just the fact that tonight we are having this session where we are talking and people are listening. I just think if I give up on believing in people, I may as well just stay at home and shut the door and not really do any kind of interacting with people. We are changing everyone. That's a known fact. However, if we remain quiet unto ourselves, the right will never know what the left knows or feels. And I think that's what has happened. And there are a lot of people who are going to not want to even have anything to do with people of color. But I've worked and lived long enough that I have seen people who show that they are genuine. And I'd like to believe that. I don't think that they're fooling me. There are going to be some people who are going to fool me. However, I don't want us to give up. I am glad that we're having this discussion because I think it's an opportunity. Sometimes you don't have opportunities. And that's what has happened when segregation happens and Blacks never talk with whites, whites never talk with Blacks. No one knows what anyone is feeling. We aren't going to change everyone, Marcus. Reverend Marcus, we aren't going to do that. But we have to start somewhere.
I agree with you. I believe in faith. Reverend, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I want a couple questions from the participants. And one of them is, are there things that you feel that you or your children that you can't that you can't do today, either you or your children? that it's denied to you, or it's not safe, or what does it look like today?
Oh, let's see.
Something that we can't do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel that I don't always test the waters to really see what I can't do, but I feel that I can't do certain things. It's not that I get in situations where I know I can't do that, so I won't even try. It's more the feeling that I get. One example that I can think of is that I don't feel comfortable, and my children don't always feel comfortable when we're in a setting. I'm trying to think of any kind of setting, or let me just be honest. It's if we go to a church that is we've never been to before, and it is predominantly white, we all feel something. And it's the same feeling. Now you might say, well, what is the feeling? The feeling is that why is this? And are we really welcomed here? And how will we know if we are? Because it's a feeling that you get because of the historical pieces that are with you that you can't erase. So I've always told my children when we've entered a place where we've not worshiped before, and we always say this is kind of common terminology. Maybe, I don't know, white people might say it too. I don't see none of us up in here. Do you see any of us up in here? And we start looking around. And I'm going to say something that's very different because my husband is white. My husband is Italian, he's white. So he comes up in that place and says, I don't see none of y'all up in here. And we're looking around. Now, why would it have to go there? Because we carry that with us, not because we feel victimized, but because it's just been historically set in place. And you carry that with you. And we're trying now through discussions like this to begin to chip away at some of those things that have caused us to feel that way. So it wouldn't be so much as, are there places we can't go? Feel like we can go most places, but it's how we feel when we're in that place. Miss Lillie and Marcus, Reverend Marcus, do you have anything to kind of add to that? I saw some nodding.
Yeah, because when you're talking about church, I've been in church like all my life. All my life I've been in church, somebody's church somewhere. I feel uncomfortable in white church. I do. And the reason I feel uncomfortable, and it's not because I don't believe they worship the same God that I worship and believe in, it's the way they worship. I was invited to a church out in the suburbs one day to preach. I'm glad. So, I'm thinking, we're gonna have church. You know what I mean? We're gonna have church. I go in and I was like, wow, okay. Yeah. Ain't no God in here. No, well, for real though. Yeah, I don't go to certain places for being a black person, a black pastor, a black minister, a black person. Religion, relationship with our higher power has always been the center of our community. I mean, historically, we have believed and we still believe that it was God that brought us through. I mean, Old Testament, God talking to Moses and all of those scriptures, we take personal as God having been that sustaining power that brought us out of Egypt, that sustained us those 40 years and all of those things. We take those personal. So our worship experience is totally different. So when I go to some of my brothers and sisters places of worship, it's like, yeah. But when it comes to places or things I feel that I or my kids or my children can't do, I don't have any children, but I'm married to a white person as well, and I'm constantly reminded of that. But there are certain structures, systems that are in place that prohibit us from moving out. Um, and people say that slavery has ended, and that word is no longer used, but there's still systems and structures that are in place that were put in place years ago that still exist that um, prohibit us from moving around. For instance, if you become, we have, we know that there's an inordinate number of Black and brown folk incarcerated. We know what plea bargains are for. You get convicted of a felony, you can never be a real estate agent, you can never hold a liquor license. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can't do, which means you can also not run for office. You can never, so there's a whole lot of votes that are taken uh, 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 off the table by virtue of the fact that we've locked you up on some humdrum stuff, convicted you of a felony, and so we've just taken you out the battlefield. We basically silenced you, and so we see a whole generation of folk that have fallen victim to that.
Mm. I'm glad you speak of others' experiences, because that is also very important to mention, that it might not be in our sphere or our experience, but it certainly has been in other people's experiences. I want to give something to what I said about going to a church that, are any of us up in here? Because although we feel that, I also know that that's not why I worship. So when I go to a place by choice where there's nobody up in there that looks like us, I go to worship a Heavenly Father that I believe is in this place. I know, Marcus, you said something very different, Reverend Marcus, but is in this place. And so when I am there to worship the Lord. And in the midst of that, I do know that because my identity and my children know the Lord and my husband know the Lord, we are able to worship with people that are different in color and even in the style of worship, that we're able to do that because our identity is locked into the truth, which is Jesus Christ. And so I was really saying all that to say the feeling is important, because I don't think necessarily that many white people attend all Black churches. We do it more than they do, I think. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know that for sure. And we do a lot more things more than white folk do, because there's less of us, more places that are, I believe, more comfortable for them to go to, for white folks to go to. So, in that sense, the feeling is very important. It's what you said, Miss Lillie, earlier. It wasn't so much, it was what happened to me, but it was the feeling that happened to me that still exists with you today. And I think that's a place to meet white folk, is where what we felt like if a brother's incarcerated or a sister's incarcerated, and I'm talking about a person of color, how humiliating that is. And once you're released, how you still can. So now when you're in the company of white people, you still feel that feeling of, I don't belong here. They don't know what I'm thinking or feeling because they've not experienced something like this.
Or
and I know
if
that
they
white
know,
people
how
are
will they treat me?
Right. And I know that white people are incarcerated too, but because of the way we have had to exist in America, it's very different for us. And so that's just what I wanted to add.
I'd just like to add something about the feelings and church. I'm Catholic, and I've been Catholic for, I'd say at least 45 years. And I was going to a church right here in Liverpool. My children were confirmed, baptized in the church. However, I was speaking about having people up in here. I was in the extreme minority. I think there was one other family there. And now that wouldn't bother me, because if you're Catholic and if you're a person of color, already you are in the minority. And I know that. However, I just could not feel that comfortable in the church in Liverpool. However, one time I went to a church in Syracuse, now that I changed my membership, and I didn't go for a service. I went for a memorial service for one of my sorority sisters. It was a memorial service, but there was a totally different feeling in this church. I'm telling you, it was a memorial service, but I could feel the warmth of the people in the church. Now, this is a church, and I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that there are probably, I'd say, I don't know the exact number, I would say probably about 25 people of color, not all in the same mass, but there was something about that particular mass. It's All Saints. I'll tell you the name of the church. It's over by Manley Field House. After that service, it was 3 years ago, I came home after the service and I said to my husband, I'm changing my membership. I don't know about you, but I felt totally different during the service, doing every aspect of that service. And I am just so in love with
Red
the
Daily.
manner of the church, the way I feel in the church.
Mhm.
I feel so totally comfortable. I don't look at color. I just
Yeah.
look at what I'm worshiping. So I perhaps it's because of the particular religion that I'm a part of. And it's not that I would not ever go back to the church that I left Liverpool, but I would never restore my membership there, because
Ha-
where I am now, I feel just like I am at home.
Have you
So I
always
think
been
it's the feeling.
have you always been Catholic, Miss Fields?
Nope, I grew up Methodist.
And why'd you become Catholic?
Because I married a Catholic.
Oh, okay.
And my husband went to St. Lucy's.
Okay.
And I was going to remain a Methodist because I loved what I was raised as.
Mhm.
However, it was the priest who didn't put any pressure on me, but he was so gentle, God bless him, he's deceased now. It was Father McCluskey, and some of you who are Catholics in here, you may have heard of him. He said, you know, Lillie, it's up to you. And I'm not pushing you. I mean, and he was very gentle. And that's the reason I changed. And I just did not want to go to two different churches on Sunday morning. And I know there are families who do that well, and I admire them for doing it. But for me, I thought it was hard. I agreed before getting married that my children would be Catholics, and that's a part of the religion. I accepted that. And so as a result of that, I'm just so very happy. I do know what you mean by going to churches when you are the only ones there and people look around at you and they don't make eye contact. I was beginning to feel that in the church that I was in Liverpool. But I don't know why I stayed as long as I did. I just think it was the convenience of just being there. I could even walk to the church. But I'm so happy now where I am. And I think it has to do with just the total differences of the acceptance of the majority of the people. I'm not saying that everyone there is so in love with the integration of the church, but they certainly show me that they are. And I welcome the opportunity of going. I miss it because of this pandemic, you know. So that's my spiel about the
So,
church.
so you're speaking to a church that, well, Sonya, you've been to my church, and so you know.
I have.
And God love you. And your husband helped put a washer and dryer in for us too. So I love you.
Yes,
but we're
that's
a
right.
white church, and
Yes.
probably most of us are there. If we're members of church, they're probably white churches. So
Yes.
and you know, and we recognize, or at least I recognize, Reverend Jackson, that this this is the thing that now that we have time, let's focus on race. And it's like, well, and there's a lot of truth in that. We probably would have been doing something else if it hadn't been for the pandemic. But maybe better late than never, or at least it started. But so what's the role of churches like mine, who kind of feel like, this is something needs to happen. We'd like to do something. But we don't want to be, like you said, we don't want to come uninvited with the answers, or thinking that we have the answers to solve this. And so um, what's our
What's
role? What's our role? What do we need to do now?
The very first thing I would personally ask you all to do as men and women of faith is to pray. Keep us lifted in your prayers, because we truly believe that prayer changes things. And I know you hear that often, but I truly believe that. The reason I say that is Garrett and I have gotten to speak and share different spaces. And one of the things we created after the protests started and at the beginning of the pandemic was the Syracuse CERT team, and that stands for Clergy Emergency Response Team. And so what it is a group of urban pastors, there's 5 of us, that respond nightly to shootings, stabbings, house fires, and other inner city issues where we can be used. Sometimes we have to go to hospital to give notifications. Sometimes we go to a fire and we just give somebody a blanket, but we're there for them. We need your prayers there. Because 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, South Side, I was at a house fire last night in Solvay. I was at a shooting probably 2 or 3 months ago on the South Side where the young lady was shot in the head. And then a couple of days later, the young man was shot in the house, 4 or 5 houses down from that spot. So there's a lot of stuff that we as people of color are dealing with.
Yeah.
Women who are being abused. I work at Bear House in the daytime, and so I'm privy to a lot of domestic violence issues. So women and men who are living in domestic violence situations are now shut up with their abusers with no escapes. The shelters are full. They have nowhere to go. Children are getting on parents' nerves. Money's tight. So there's a lot of stuff that folk are dealing with. We're in the middle of, for us Christians, we're in the middle of Advent, but for the world, this is Christmas, where all the focus is on giving. Folk don't have anything to give, and so tempers are short. So guys, keep us lifted in your prayers. And one of the other things we do is we have what's called the Phoenix Group, and we have 65 inmates on our list that we send greeting cards to, packs of 4. I have a lady from Liverpool. She bought me some today. So we send greeting cards, writing paper, postage stamps to incarcerated folks so that they can be in relationship with their families out here in the streets, because those things are important. But yeah, your prayers is more. I'm just telling you, I truly see. I years ago, I didn't want to have anything to do with church and God and all that other kinds of stuff. My grandmother was a Seventh-day Adventist, and I started acting up, and she sent me to South Lancaster, Massachusetts, where my aunt was teaching in a Seventh-day Adventist college. And so through 8th grade, I was there. And then I started acting up there and ran away. So they shipped me to North Carolina, New Bern, where my dad had just graduated from Salisbury Hood Theological Seminary and became a chaplain. So being shoved with church, I was tired of God and everything that having to do with it. So eventually I ran away, went to California, lived down the street for a while, came back. They said, you want to run away, you want to be grown, we're going to send you to college. So I was Catholic, got a scholarship through the Knights of Columbus. I became a 3rd degree. They sent me to Catholic University. I went to New Orleans, met somebody, called myself on in love. They were from Syracuse. The relationship didn't last, but I fell in love with Syracuse. But I've been shot twice. I've been stabbed 5 times, got half of a right lung left. So had it not been for prayer, had it not been for a praying grandmother, had it not been for somebody being in touch, James says that the prayers of a righteous person availeth much, gets the job done. had it not been for folk praying for me, I wouldn't be here today. So that's why I sincerely solicit your prayers. I'm done.
I'd like to just say also that you were talking about, Garrett, when you said, what can our church, what can we do? And I was thinking one of the best things that I think any person can do of faith is to love and serve one another. And I know that we think that sounds like, well, let's just come up with a program that we can do something. No, I'd love to see something start at a level that most churches don't always start at. They always start from the top and then go down. I'd like to see it start from the bottom up and see youth leaders or whatever youth person in the church. I'd love to see youth folk getting together and talking about some of these things that are very important regarding race, and maybe invite another youth group to be a part of that. I'd like to see the churches get the youth more involved in race relations and in having a relationship with people who have a different experience than you have. Because when we start with our children, we're really building the world. At this point, to start with people who want to be involved and they can be involved, and it's a good place to start. But I think an even better place to start are with children in the church, because that's where attitudes and minds are shaped most. And we wait until they become teenagers or until they become, adults, that we begin to say, now be a part of some service, something in a community that doesn't look like you. That's never too late, but it's not the best place to start. And I think if we start with children, as young as we can, as young as understanding, in the church, we're giving them that real foundation of truth. And I think that's what's going to make a difference. So when you talk about that, Garrett, that's what comes to my mind.
But Garrett, to piggyback on what Miss Sonya said, sometimes I think that we have given a lot of folk a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to the word church. I think that, especially some of our evangelical brothers and sisters have really soured a whole lot of folk when it comes to church. Are you born again? Are you saved? Those types of things. And I think that if we look at Jesus as how he dealt with folk in the world and pattern our treatment and our interaction with folk outside of the four walls we call church as an example or as an operations manual, I think we'll do better. At no time did Jesus ask folk, are you saved? You need to come to my church. He met their physical needs or their mental or emotional needs first, and it was because of the love that he showed through his actions that they were attracted to him, right? Right, guys?
Yes.
Right. So when I was younger, I was, like I said, I was in the Catholic Church. And because of that, I went to Dominican Republic. I learned to water ski. I learned to snow ski. I went camping, all of those things. And, coming from being raised by just a grandmother and not having money, but it was never an issue for me. I was always invited along on these things. And that really, I mean, oh my God, it opened up such, it just opened up the world for me, being able to travel and to go places and see things that I wouldn't ordinarily have. I mean, yeah, you talked about youth group, Ms. Sonya. I was in high school and became an explorer and all these kinds of stuff. And they sent us to Dominican Republic for 3 weeks and all those great things, and took us to North Carolina to learn how to go skiing and all this kinds of stuff. So it really had a great impact on my life, Garrett. That did.
Okay, there's just one thing. I agree with what you're saying, and I'm glad that we're having a chance to share ideas. But the one thing that I'm thinking of, just to piggyback on what Sonya was saying, and then I'll catch up with what you were saying, Reverend Marcus, regarding children. One of my girlfriends told me her daughter, 4 years old, I'm not sure if I shared this when we met in November, in a preschool. She ran to the door when it was time for them to line up to go. I'm not sure where they were going. And another 4-year-old little white girl said to her, brown girls can't be line leaders. So I piggyback on what Sonya was saying, because I just think that that child didn't come into the world feeling that way. She had to learn that somewhere. If a brown girl can't be a line leader, the first person to the door, depending on what the rules of the classroom is, should be able to be the line leader. So I think what I'm really saying is that to start with children is certainly a good idea. You can talk about the values of fairness. You can talk with them about speaking up when they're hurt, because some adults won't speak up when they're hurt. And just these groups, small groups, sometimes Blacks never talk to whites and whites never talk to Blacks. I'm wondering how many teenagers, white teenagers, are aware once they become a driver. How many of them, if they're pulled over by the police, realize that it's just they're being pulled over? Maybe their tail light is out, etc. Most Blacks, when they're pulled over, they get very nervous. Yeah. How many of them know that? I mean, just situations such as that, I think it helps to build more understanding of what people are experiencing. And for that 4-year-old to say to another child of a different color, you can't be the line leader because you are not white. There is something there that that child learned. And I think you can help children. You're not going to save them all. But what I'm saying is that it might be a beginning to start to help them to understand why they're saying things and things that can be hurtful. And as far as Marcus, the only thing I'd like for you, excuse me, when you mention about the cards that you're collecting and what you're doing in the city, I think I commend you for that.
Yes.
If you could get my email address later on, because I work with some organizations and I didn't know that you were doing that. So I'd like to share that with some of the people that I'm working with. You never know, how we might be able to at least understand and connect with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I put my email
Pardon me?
address in the chat, so feel free.
Did you put it in the
to,
chat? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I haven't looked. Thank you.
Friends, I want to thank you so much for this. It feels like one conversation among many that needs to happen, that should have happened long ago. And I hope that this is I really do hope this is the beginning of something. I'm just speaking for our congregation, but I think for many congregations as well would echo this, that there is maybe there's a sea change happening because there's more awareness. Maybe there's that younger generation is going to address this in a way that's more honest, and with greater, maybe with a little greater courage as well. But I want to thank you for this gift of being with us tonight and sharing your stories and your thoughts. And it has been a great gift to us. So thank you. And I hope that we can do something like this again sometime. Gosh, Marcus, you might get an invitation to come out to the suburbs again and preach, but
No, I would love to.
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sonya.
I just wanted to say, Garrett, that I have really enjoyed. I hope this is the beginning. I mean, this was just I think it just broke us in to have discussions. I'd love to hear more about at some point from your congregation about where they are with all of what we've said. I know they put in some things in the chat. But I'd like to hear I'd like for those voices as well to be heard. That's very important, I think.
Right.
Because in the sharing there are many voices and there have been many experiences. It's certainly been our privilege and opportunity tonight to share, but I'd love to hear so that there can begin to be dialogue and movement from that. I think you can move in situations like that. So thanks.
Well, when we can move this conversation off of Zoom and into a real room, then they'll be able to have some of that dialogue. And so we'll invite you back and to do some more of this.
Amen.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you so much.
It's a good beginning.
It is a good beginning, and
Yes.
may it only be a beginning for us.
Yes.
So
Let's pray that everyone will be well and the pandemic will end one day soon.
that's right.
It
That's
may not
right.
be soon, but at least end.
Yes.
God bless all of
Is
you.
this your Bible study night, Garrett?
This isn't my Bible study night.
Okay.
Thanks for everyone for being here and for listening.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
God bless y'all.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey,
Good
and
night.
Marcus, I did not see it, so maybe you can tell me where I'm looking at the chat and I didn't see your contact, but I'll get it even if I go through the minister to get it. Don't worry.
Right. I'll send emails to the panel there so you can stay in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Good night, everybody.
Everyone.
Good night.
Good
Okay,
night.
thank you, everyone. Good night. Thanks, Garrett.
Good night. Okay.